We've all heard Harry Belafonte, whether we know it or not, singing that banana boat song in Beetlejuice, telling Sonoras everywhere to shake it. But until recently, I did not recognize him for what arguably should be his greatest contribution to American history, his activism in the civil rights movement. Because of this, I began to educate myself on his importance to the cause, and in falling down that research wormhole, I found that a great deal of his works deal directly with the issues of race that took precedence at the time they were made. Specifically, I found that the 1959 film, which he produced and starred in, Odds Against Tomorrow, deserves a great deal more recognition than it currently receives. As a piece of fiction regarding the tensions of the civil rights movement, Odds is a masterwork. Belafonte moved onto the film scene after the success of his first album and stage shows. Initially, he starred in musicals, specifically Carmen Jones and Island in the Sun. While Carmen Jones was blatantly black, Belafonte noted that Island in the Sun was squeamish about showing his character having a relationship with its white female lead. Belafonte believed that the theater, his first artistic love, was a place of social truth, and with that idea was inspired to create his own production studio, one that would produce films which allowed that social truth to shine forth. He was not alone in this, as Brown v. Board of Education had just ruled segregation illegal when he formed his company. In her work, Becoming Belafonte, Judith E. Smith notes that many African-American writers and artists felt increasing urgency to address the mainstream erasure of Black experience. Furthermore, she says, there was no consensus on how to portray all facets of the Black experience respectfully, while continuing to challenge white supremacist definitions and policing of racial boundaries. There may not have been a consensus, but Belafonte had an idea of what he himself could do, and while he would enlist some talented friends to help him do it, the passion and commitment which he brought to the project of the piece which needed to be made makes me feel comfortable calling it essentially his. He'd take a noirish crime thriller, which he loved, called Odds Against Tomorrow, and invite a blacklisted screenwriter, Abe Polonsky, to adapt it for the screen. Belafonte refers to the novel, and therefore the film, as a bank heist story, but one in which race plays a determining part. The film centers around Ed Begley's character Berg, an ex-cop, who enlists Belafonte's jazz singer Johnny Ingram and Robert Ryan's racist white ex-con Slater. In Belafonte's words, how the three struggle to work together and pull off the heist amid sharp racial divisions is what gives the film its power. That power does not come from a feel-good story in which each character makes it out with their share of the stolen money, having learned the true meaning of friendship and racial equality. In his exploration of John Oliver Killens, who was credited as screenwriter for the film in order to cover for the blacklisted Polonsky, Keith Gilliard discusses that the novel's ending was changed drastically, as the original text descended from a promising crime thriller into a fatuous description of white hatred and black servitude. This descent is thanks to the attempt on the part of the novel's author to neuter the threat of Slater and consider him the hero of the piece due to his ability to bond with Ingram and apparently leave racism behind forever. This is highly unrealistic, and at the time it was not nearly enough of a message to be worthy of Belafonte's film. But Polonsky's changes allowed for a much more nuanced and layered piece to emerge from this faulty original argument. Slater is written by Polonsky as unapologetically racist, and at first time officially seeing him on screen, he picks up a young black girl who stepped into his path on the sidewalk, refers to her with an epithet, and casually mentions that her existence in the way on the sidewalk is enough to get her hurt someday. She smiles, not quite understanding, and he goes on his merry way. This is the norm, evidently. But while it is made clear to us that Slater is racially intolerant, the idea is confused a bit further when we see him interacting with his girlfriend. After Burke tells him about his plan for the heist, Slater recounts it to the loving woman, and she balks at the idea, wanting instead to sacrifice her livelihood to support the couple. The implications of how she plans to earn causes Slater to balk, and he insists that it is his place to support the two of them. So soon after hearing his prejudice, we are meant to see that Slater has honorable intentions and is therefore forgivable. But wait, did I not just say that Polonsky makes Slater irredeemable? Why, no. The big change lies in the fact that he makes Belafonte's character, Johnny Ingram, have an equal amount of unfortunate opinions and flaws. No longer a flat tool to only redeem Slater, Ingram is able to act as a foil to him instead. Let's explore it. Perhaps this is a consequence of the black and white film medium, but upon first seeing Ingram, his hidden face allows for the thought to the uninitiated that the character is white. After all, Burke treats him as though he's a citizen of the same class as himself, and he previously interacted just as fairly with the racist Slater. Perhaps this is a comment on Belafonte's own internalized concerns with his mainstream appeal, part of which was said to be a product of his non-threatening good looks, which conformed to the white standard of beauty. But it also reflects the theme which continues through the film, that outside appearance bears nothing upon the content of one character. And that sounds cheesy. It is. And Belafonte and Polanski realize this, which is why the content of each character is not meant to appear overwhelmingly positive, even Ingram. Similar to Slater, Ingram is introduced as suffering from issues with money. Of course, this is a basic need experienced by most adults at some point, and all college students. And on our first sight of Ingram after Burke invites him to participate in the heist, he interacts with his loved ones just as Slater did. But unlike Slater, he says nothing about the heist to his daughter and her mother. He obviously loves the young girl, and he has a great deal of fondness for her mother as well. So why the secrecy? Because our boy Belafonte has some hidden depths, just as Slater does, but his are not so hopeful. While the ex-con is surprisingly capable of love, Ingram is capable of worse things, such as a crippling addiction to gambling, the reason for those pesky money troubles. Those troubles are what come to bite him and push him from hesitant to willing to assist in the heist. The men whom he's indebted to appear at his workplace after a lengthy musical sequence in which we are reminded temporarily that the guy playing Ingram is a famous singer. Those men usher him into an office after said performance and explain to him exactly what kind of trouble he is in. The tension of the scene is palpable, and it ends with Ingram forced into a submissive role to the men. The danger is clear. He's endangered himself and possibly those around him with his gambling issues. But this is where the character diverts a bit. Instead of taking the threats as a lesson, Ingram seems to believe that the issue belongs entirely to the party doing the threatening. Upset by the whole shebang, Ingram pitches a fit, becoming slightly unhinged, and continues to interrupt his fellow singer as she attempts to perform a fitting piece called All Men Are Evil. And note the specificity, or perhaps the lack thereof, in that song. All men are evil, inherently. We'll come back to that. The next time we see Ingram at home, he's still upset by the whole situation, specifically because in a previous scene we found out that the men he owes have seen his daughter and know that they can go after her and her mother. Any man should be afraid in this situation. He should fear for his family and look for ways to protect them. But here comes that flaw again. Ingram is too selfish to understand that he needs to change himself and perhaps separate himself from them to fix it, an idea that his ex-wife, as she is revealed to be in this scene, makes concrete when she insists that is why she is his ex-wife. But Ingram turns it around on her, arguing that she is too willing to be subservient to the desires of white people, which has no contextual point within the fight up to now. It makes sense, understanding the tensions of the time and seeing the white man who holds Ingram and his family in a dangerous grasp. But Ingram's issue is that he shifts the pressure of the situation to those around him, those men who threaten him and even his ex-wife, when the blame is partially his. Racial tensions are not his fault, of course, as much as his skin color is not his fault, but his unwillingness to change, to see past the absolute worst examples of the other side, is as much his downfall as it is eventually Slater's as well. Before moving to that, it is worth noting that during this scene, separate from Ingram's various human failings, that the two argue fairly clearly about approaches to racial understanding, with hers being that cooperation is key and his that the oppressed are meant to fight back against the system which oppresses them. Both are common ideas which were prevalent among civil rights activists. And, most importantly, neither of these arguments is allowed to win the scene. So the film is acknowledging the importance of each argument and legitimizing the existence of each, without placing one ahead of the other. Their daughter interrupts the fight and Ingram leaves, with both still holding steady to their ideal. The ending of the film is famously, in the words of Belafonte, bleak. The robbers begin their heist, but it goes awry, and eventually the mastermind Burke winds up shot to death as Ingram and Slater look on in horror from afar. The two run away from the encroaching police and wind up in a scuffle, each blaming the other for the imminent failure. They chase one another into a nearby industrial building containing large foreboding tanks of something which is undoubtedly explosive, and they shoot at each other. I'll let you figure out what happens. The shots trigger an explosion of the containers which the two men stand on. This explosion makes their bodies unrecognizable, and in a fairly straightforward, ironic twist, the white and black of their skin is rendered pointless. It is not the most gentle or nuanced ending ever made, but the specifics of it do offer up an unsettling truth. Both parties in this case were equally guilty. Gilliard says that this emerges from the unabated racism of either party. Not only that, it comes from a much scarier truth, that human beings are flawed. All men are evil. In this struggle, all that could be had was the best of either side, and if neither was up to the task, how could change be expected? For a nation which was on the way to being mended with desegregation, this was exactly the message the people needed, that mutual understanding was and is key. Harry Belafonte used his fame to make people listen, and in a great many ways he succeeded. Odds Against Tomorrow should be counted among those successes. Unfortunately, the film did not make the money it needed to be spread and engaged by the masses. It was Belafonte's last scratch at the film industry for a great deal of time. But as the characters in the film learn, the acceptance of failure builds growth. In Belafonte's case, the failure of the film allowed him to push harder in his activism at a crucial time for the civil rights movement. Society may have seemingly progressed in 2016, and Odds Against Tomorrow all but disappeared from public consciousness, but let the deceptively simple message at the core of the film remain. If we acknowledge our flaws, we can make a journey to fixing them.